Welcome to Wonder Ministries. I am your host, Pastor David Carpenter. I'd like to thank you for tuning in this week as we continue our commentary study in the book of 1 John. We're in chapter 3, verse 16 to 24. Last week, John pointed out that the evidences of a right relationship with Christ were, number one, reflected by the obedience that we carry out in serving Jesus. Number two, our love for our brothers and sisters in Christ, that is, loving those that are fellow believers. And number three, an indication that we are set apart from the world, that we're not like the world. We're different. We're in Jesus, not in the world. There's something definitely different about those who love Jesus Christ and have a relationship with Him. And that's what John was kind of getting at in a nutshell. So we want to move on right now into this week's study, verse 16 to 17, and it goes like this. By this we know love, because He laid down His life for us. That is, Jesus laid down His life for us. And we also ought to lay down our lives for the brethren, that is, our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ. But whoever has this world's goods and sees his brother in need and shuts up his heart from him, how does the love of God abide in him? So John says that, one of the outward works of love that a Christian displays, it involves selflessness when it comes to the tangible things of this world. That is, the things that we own in this world, the things that we have possession of. We're not to be greedy or to be stingy with our possessions. Now, John isn't saying that we are exacted really to help everyone in the world, but I wish that we could. He is talking in the context really of helping out fellow believers. And that's why he says brothers, So where is your evidence for love for your brothers? That's a question. Well, one way is by sharing our goods and helping out. That's an evidence of expressing our love for our brothers and sisters, as Jesus says, or John says rather, is by helping our brothers and sisters out within the church. So the early church understood this very, very well. In fact, the very onset of the church, in the very beginning from Acts chapter 4, verse 32 and following, the church did just that. If you flip back and go into the book of Acts chapter 4, you'll read that the church expressly shared in all things that they had, all the possessions that they had, they shared with one another. So those that had much would be just as equal to those that had little. And so they kind of came together so that it all equaled out and that those that had little would not have lack. Verse 18, my little children, let us not love in word or in tongue, but in the deed and truth. But in deed and truth. So my children, let us not love in word or in tongue, but in deed and in truth. So John says, put your money where your mouth is. Put up or shut up. Talk is cheap. Actions speak louder than words. Don't just say you love your brothers and sisters in Christ. Do it by showing it by an outward example. So by sharing your goods with people and helping people out in need, especially those who are your brothers and sisters in Christ, is an outward example or evidence of our love for Jesus Christ, because we're not stingy with our possessions. In fact, we're willing to be selfless and to share those with others. Verse 19, and by this we know that we are of the truth and shall assure our hearts before Him. So when we help out our fellow believers, our love for Christ is revealed and verified. Proof of the Christian life is selflessness and not selfishness. So when we help out fellow believers in Christ Jesus, that is an obvious proof of our selflessness in serving Jesus. Jesus came as a selfless servant, as the incarnate Christ into this world. And He is our example in this life for us. To live the Christian life means to live selflessly, just as Jesus lived selfless when He came into this world. Verse 20 and 21, for if our heart condemns us, God is greater than our heart and knows all things. Beloved, if our heart does not condemn us, we have confidence towards God. So if our hearts condemn us and they cause us to realize that we need to get going and do better at sharing and helping, then we need to give it and turn everything that we have in our troubled life over to Jesus, because He's able to forgive and to strengthen us. And so if our heart's condemning us because in our own weakness we have an inability to be selfless, because we're being a little bit selfish, because we have some pride or some arrogance, or because it's all about us in this world, our heart will condemn us, and we need to come to Christ for it, because He's able to forgive us, because He's stronger than we are, and to move us into that place, into that position where we're all about helping people out, our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ Jesus. Our condemnation of the heart reveals that we have work to do. And that's a good point. But if our heart is right, we have confidence in God, we trust in Him, we are in a right relationship with Him. And tell you what, that's a good thing, okay? If our heart doesn't condemn us and we're in a right relationship with God and we're out there serving people within the church, that we're meeting the needs of the people within the church, and we're helping them out, we're praying for them, we're sitting with them, we're just having good old fellowship, let's just face it. There's a lack of that going on in the church today. I can tell you that firsthand. There's a lack of people that are leaving their houses, that are capable to leave their houses and going and sit with those who can't leave their house and having fellowship with them in their home. There's a lack of those who go and visit the ill. There's a lack of those who go and visit the homeless. There's a lot of lack in the world as far as fellow believers going out ministering to other fellow believers who are in conditions where maybe they're homebound, or maybe they're homeless, or they're ill, or for whatever reason, there's just a total lack of believers going out and sharing in just true fellowship. Yeah, sure, we come together on Sunday and we worship together, whether it's through the internet or it's in person, we congregate together. That might take place, but after that, after that 2-hour window on Sunday morning, how well are we coming together in fellowship in Christ Jesus with fellow believers, from Sunday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon to, the following Sunday at 7 a.m.? I don't know. I'm just asking a question, just throwing it out there. We need to do better at it, at doing that, at really congregating and fellowshipping with fellow believers. Verse 22. And whatever we ask, we receive from him, because we keep his commandments and do those things that are pleasing in his sight. Sounds like being right with God has its rewards. Maybe the credit card companies had those commercials, right? And they say, what's in your wallet? So being right with God definitely has its rewards, right? So when we're right with him, not only do we have fellowship with fellow believers and the saints, but having a right relationship with him puts us in a situation where our heart doesn't condemn us. And if our heart's not condemning us, that's because we have a right relationship with both God and the brothers and sisters in Christ Jesus. And if you go back and read all of 1 John, you find out that John really preaches about that. In order to be right with God, you got to be right with God and people. You got to be right with Jesus and people. You got to be right with Jesus and the brothers and sisters in Christ. And John's big on that. And Jesus is big on it too, because he asked us to serve other people. He came as a servant again, a selfless servant, and he is our model in this present world. Verse 23, and this is his commandment, that we should believe on the name of his Son, Jesus Christ, and love one another as he gave commandment. So, what are the 3 greatest commandments? Well, the 3 greatest commandments are this: Matthew 22 and 37. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. 2nd greatest commandment follows right up after that. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's number 1 and number 2, right? So what's the 3rd greatest commandment? The 3rd greatest commandment is this, John 13 and 34, where John says that you are to love your brothers and sisters in Christ. That is, there was a new commandment given from Jesus Christ, and that we shall love our brothers and sisters. Verse 24, now he who keeps his commandments, that's Jesus' commandments, and abides in him, and he in him, and by this we know that he abides in us, by the Spirit whom he has given us. Enough said. Sounds good to me. God bless, and have a good week.